Well, welcome everybody. As you may have heard, we are going to be recording this webinar. So we can send it out to everyone who is registered after the event. But hello everyone, and welcome to Protecting Children in Washington State from Female Genital Mutilation and Cutting, an event hosted by the Washington Coalition to End FGMC in partnership with SAO, the USN FGMC Network, Mother Africa, and the Children's Alliance. My name is Maria Taher, and I'm a coalition member and a co-founder and U.S. Executive Director of SAO US. While we wait for others to join, again, feel free to introduce yourself while in the chat box as well. We also wanted to remind everybody that, again, we are recording this event, and we will make that link available to all those who have registered after the event is concluded. And we do have closed captions available for those who would like to use them. And if you would like to, you should be able to go to a tab that says More, and then click on Show Subtitle to be able to enable that feature. Finally, just to help us understand a bit more about our audience's views on FGMC, we have a really quick Zoom poll that we want to launch before we dive into the content of the webinar. So if we can launch that Zoom poll, that would be wonderful. And thank you in advance for filling it out. But if everyone could just take a few seconds to fill this out, it's not too long, we would very much appreciate that. And I'll give everybody a few seconds to do that, maybe 20 seconds. As that's going on, maybe we can flip to the next slide too. Perfect. All right, I see people are filling it out. Great. Looks like we've got 50% people participated. So if you haven't yet participated, maybe you can continue to participate. Okay. We'll keep that poll up if it hasn't already, if you haven't filled it out yet. But just to continue, I'm going to quickly go over our agenda for today. We are really hoping to show you a few videos from our SAO's Voices to End FGMC digital storytelling project, and in order to help share some context on FGMC, who it impacts and what it is. Also share some data and about the impact of FGMC in the US and in the Washington area specifically. And then for the majority of the event, we will include a panel discussion with several members of the Washington Coalition revolving around the need for policy addressing FGMC. We hope to also have a Q&A from the audience as well. So we really want to make this interactive, and please feel free to ask questions throughout the event in the chat box. And then towards the end, when we have the Q&A portion, we'll be happy to take those questions. Okay, so before I hand it over to our panel, we have people joining from all over and with different knowledge levels of FGMC. And so for those unfamiliar with female genital mutilation or cutting, or FGMC, the World Health Organization has defined FGMC as all procedures involving the partial or total removal of external female genitalia or other injury to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. Internationally, it is recognized as a human rights violation that can cause negative health consequences, such as difficulties during childbirth, lifelong psychological and emotional trauma, and in some cases, even death. Yet, despite negative consequences, FGMC is practiced worldwide, and it is viewed as a social norm by practicing communities, meaning that whether the reason for it continuing is tradition, cleanliness, culture, religion, controlling a woman's sexuality, marriageability, or maintaining purity, FGMC is viewed as a normalized practice being done for the good of the girl. So to provide a bit more context on FGMC, before we hand it over to the panel speakers, today we want to share with you two videos created by two of the speakers on our panel, Absa Samba and Mona Osman. Both these amazingly courageous women come from communities that practice FGC, and both have shared their stories in the Voices to End FGMC digital storytelling project. This project, created by SEO and Story Center, seeks to bring those who come from impacted communities together so they can share their stories, build community with one another, and create short videos that call for an end to the practice. Absa took part in our Voices workshop a few years ago, while Mona completed our workshop just this past November 2022. And the videos from that workshop are actually not set to be released until April, but today she has agreed to let us share her video with you all for the first time during this webinar. So as the videos play, please do feel free to share reactions in the chat box. I should say that the videos are not graphic, but we understand that this is a sensitive and tough subject. So if you need to step away for a moment, please feel free to do so. And with that, let's go ahead and play Absa's video.
When I was in 6th grade, a group of popular girls at my school were saying they wanted to be friends only with those who are pure and clean, meaning only those girls who had been cut. That was the very first time I had my peers discussing the topic. I wasn't sure whether or not I had been through the procedure. So I went home that day and I asked my mom, "Funtata nya katole?" I was so excited when my mom answered yes. At school the next day, I joined the popular group in shaming the girls who hadn't been cut. Solima, we called them. Then in middle school, I joined a club that taught us how harmful FGM is to the girls who were cut and to society. I felt ashamed and guilty for all the girls I had shamed for not being cut. I wondered how many of them had gone home and asked their families to subject them to FGM. I was also angry at my community for continuing to subject girls and women to something so unnecessary and painful. So I started having conversations with my family about the harmful effects of the practice. And when I didn't succeed at home, I talked about it on the radio and made them listen. Over the years, I have engaged in education and advocacy work, traveling across communities in the Gambia, hosting radio talk shows, presenting in various classrooms in the US, and even testifying before a Vermont Senate committee on a bill criminalizing FGM. Yet, as my activism grows, one thing continues to trouble me. How do I convince the world to end such a horrible practice when I still cannot convince some of my own family members?
So thank you, Absa. And again, feel free to share any comments or thoughts in the chat box, but we will move on to Mona's video. And this is the first time we are actually showing this publicly. So thank you again, Mona, for being brave enough to allow us to do this.
It's not easy when it's your story. I was only 8 years old when it happened. I did not realize this moment had stuck with me until I started trying to write it down. It is early in the morning before sunrise. I see large, dark shadows coming into the room. I see 4 large women. They surround me and hold me down on the floor. I see my mom standing in the corner. I'm calling for her, but she is not answering. I call yet again, Hoyo, Hoyo. And she just looks at me. Her face is blank and cold. She ignores my calls. Then I see a fifth woman approaching me. She sits down on the ground in front of my feet. As the four other women hold me down, the fifth woman opens my legs and cuts me with a razor. I feel it all. There is no anesthesia or sanitation. I scream, and then one of the women puts something in my mouth to stop me. I am so scared that I thought I will die. I cannot see through my tears. I cannot breathe. The fifth woman stitches me. I feel every cut and poke. It is as if my soul left from my body, and I am staring at the wall, staring at the blades of the fan spinning round and around. They tie a rope around my thighs and knees so that I cannot take big steps and open my legs wide while I'm healing. Before that day, I trusted my mother. Afterward, I felt betrayed. I put up a wall. To this day, I think of my mother's cold face and I cry. This is the first time I have spoken of it, and I am 50-year-old. It's an awful feeling to live with. The feeling that if your closest, safest person can betray you, everyone else will too. It's not fair for any child to go through this.
So thank you, Absen. Thank you, Mona, for sharing your stories with us. And again, please feel free to leave any comments or thoughts for Mona as well. I see that some have already started to come through. It's not easy to share your story, so we're very appreciative and completely, as someone who also comes from an impacted community, understand how challenging that can be. But thank you for sharing your story and for allowing us to show folks during this webinar as well. For audience members, we wanted to really share these stories to help build that context before the panel. And we want to also bring attention to an action alert that Equality Now has put together with support from the Washington Coalition to help encourage the Washington State Legislature to pass a law in the state. We will put the link in the chat box if you're interested in supporting our advocacy efforts. Now, to provide additional context on the extent of FGMC globally and in Washington specifically, I want to invite Bettina Shell Duncan to share with us a little bit more information. Bettina?
Thank you. Thank you, Maria. Thank you for inviting me to share this information. So just by way of background, I thought I would talk a little bit about the picture, the global picture on FGMC and a local picture as well. There have been nationally representative survey data that have been collected in 31 countries where FGMC is practiced at rates of 1% or higher. And UNICEF estimates that at least 200 million women in 30 countries have undergone FGMC. This number does not include estimates from many of the immigrant communities around the world, including those in the United States. But we do have an idea of some of the figures. Am I able to forward this? Okay. In 2012, the CDC estimated that the number of US girls who are at risk of undergoing FGMC or women who are living with FGMC to be a total of almost over 500,000 women. And we have information about where these women who are affected by FGMC live around the United States. They're not equally distributed across our nation. And you can see up here in the corner at the top left is Washington State. In Washington State, we have one of the highest concentrations of women living with FGMC and girls at risk. It's estimated that more than 25,000 women and girls are affected by FGMC in Washington State. And we also have information about where throughout the state they are concentrated. The majority of these women and girls are located in the greater Seattle metro area. And the Seattle metro area is amongst the top 10 metropolitan areas in the United States with women and girls potentially who are affected by FGMC and potentially at risk of FGMC. So this, sometimes people ask the question of, is this really an issue in Washington State? And I think these numbers clarify that question. Yes, this is an issue for Washington State. At the same time, Washington State is one of 10 states in the United States that does not have any legislation in place on FGMC. Amongst the states with a high concentration of women and girls living with or at risk of FGMC, we're the only one that does not yet have a law. Also, Washington, D.C. also does not have a law addressing FGMC. And so one of the questions that women who formed this coalition asked is, why is this the case and what can be done about it? And one additional piece of information to note is that people sometimes say, does this practice actually continue after women move to the United States? And there's an increased body of research that's documenting that amongst women who come from countries with a high prevalence of FGMC, that roughly 6 out of 10 are affected by FGM in the first generation. These are women who arrived in the United States after the age of 18 or age of 13. And many of these, of course, were cut before moving to the United States. For the 1.5 generation, these are women who moved before the age of 18. The number of women affected by FGM goes down. It goes to 4 out of 10, but a proportion of these are cut after moving to the United States as well. And then in second generation girls, those who were born into the US from parents from born abroad, roughly 1 out of 10 experience FGM. So yes, this is a local issue.
Great. Thank you, Bettina, so much for providing that additional information and really helping to ground it in why we're talking about this issue within Washington State specifically as well, too. So with that information having been given, we do want to get to the heart of our event today, our panel discussion, and you will get a chance to hear more from Bettina as she is a well-known and established researcher on the issue of FGMC as well, too. But we're going to introduce the rest of our speakers. And it is my pleasure to really introduce our moderator for the panel, Apsa Samba, along with our fellow panelists, Mona Usman, Bettina Shell-Duncan, and Stefan Blandford. We will also have a special video from Senator Karen Kaiser, who is the bill sponsor for this piece of legislation that we will be talking about today. And for more information about our panelists or our panel, we are going to put a link in the chat box so that you can learn more about our speakers. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Apsa, now to help lead and moderate the panel.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for volunteering your time and your expertise and your experience with us today. To start us off, I will like to introduce myself a bit and give a brief background on the Washington Coalition to End FGMC. So my name is Apsa, like Maria said. I am a graduate student at the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance and the School of Social Work at the University of Washington, Seattle. So a brief history, the Washington Coalition started from a class assignment. Last year, I took a policy analysis class, and we had the option to choose various policy issues to look into. And I became curious about what FGM was in Washington State. So I just because of my own experience with the practice and doing work in this area, I wanted to know, what is the state doing about this issue? And it was out of that research that I found that there were two previous legislation that were introduced that never made it out of committee. And I just wrote that in my paper, and that was it. And so my professor gave me a feedback and said, I want you to find out why those bills did not move. And it was out of that research that I met with Senator Karen Kaiser. Senator Kaiser was one of the sponsors of one of the bills in 2019. And from conversations with her, it appeared that she was really interested in doing something about this issue. And that was when I reached out to a lot of the people who are on our coalition today, and many of the people, all of the people who are members of the Washington Coalition to End FGMC. We came together and started the coalition, worked with the senator to introduce a bill. I will hear a little bit more about that bill from the senator herself. And on that note, I would like to introduce Senator Karen Kaiser. Senator Kaiser is the main sponsor for the FGM bill concerning female genital mutilation. And she's also the legislative senator for the 33rd district in Washington State.
Hello. Thank you, Absa, and the rest of you for joining me today with your conference. I am unfortunately not able to come and see you in person because of our legislative calendar. As you know, my name is Senator Karen Kaiser from the 33rd Legislative District, and I'm also the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 5453, which will ban female genital mutilation in Washington State. I am optimistic about the prospects for this legislation this year, and that's primarily due to the work that you have done on this bill behind the scenes, especially the Washington Coalition to End FGMC. To give you some context about how much progress we've been making, in 2019, I sponsored a different bill to designate FGM as an unprofessional conduct for any health professional, but we never could get it moving. Last summer, when Absa came to me about the issue again, she had a much more ambitious idea in mind, and the more ambitious bill is moving forward. It just was voted out of the Ways and Means Committee. And I think the bill's prospects are very good. Now, 5453 will take several steps to prevent FGM in our state. First, it will make FGM an unprofessional conduct, as our other bill did a few years ago. But in addition, it will create the crime of FGM as a gross misdemeanor, and it establishes a 10-year statute of limitations from the date of the crime, or if the victim is a minor, until the victim turns 28. So this gives victims time enough to process what has been done to them. So they'll be able to seek justice, and they can also go to court and file a civil lawsuit and take a civil right of action for victims who are a minor. And it will allow a minor to file suit against the person who committed the FGM crime against them, and they can get damages for that assault. Finally, the bill includes FGM among types of child abuse that mandatory reporters are required to report to authorities. And this too will help to, I think, open the door on this issue and undo the secrecy that prevails currently. Now, we know there is a federal law on the books, but its legal status is a little tenuous. As you know, earlier, another federal law had been thrown out, struck down, basically with the court saying that it was a separation of powers issue. So by getting this bill forward and passed into law this year, I'm quite sure that we will have Washington State join the 40 other states that have done this with a ban on FGM for anyone in our state, and we will no longer be a haven for this practice. With your help, we can do this. And I want to emphasize that your help has been critical. Your testimony and your conversations have been critical at getting this bill moving forward. You know, it really does come down to a small group of thoughtful and committed people working together to change the world one state at a time. Thank you all for your commitment and your good work.
Thank you so much, Senator Kaiser, for that video. Senator Kaiser is a champion for working families and for women's rights in Washington State, and we're really honored to have her introduce this bill and work with us in this process. I have two updates to share about the bill. Since this bill was introduced, since this video was recorded, the bill has now passed the Washington Senate, and it passed unanimously. It has also moved to the House, and it's now in the House Community Safety, Justice, and Reentry Committee, where it has also been scheduled for public testimony on March 13th. So we will share links in the chat. You can vote to support this bill, tell House members that you want them to pass this law. You can sign up to testify. You can submit written testimony in support of the bill. Those links will be in the chat for you. The second update is that there is a component of this bill that was not mentioned in the video, and that is the education and outreach component. And this is a big provision in the bill. When it passes, it will allow the Department of Health to implement education and outreach programming on this issue in Washington State. It will be a great opportunity for communities to engage in dialogue and conversations on this issue. It will also be an opportunity to train first responders, medical practitioners, teachers, service providers on this topic, and how to identify individuals at risk, but how to also better support victims and survivors of this practice in Washington State. To move on with our panel, I would also like to share that Washington State has been ranked number 18 for gender equality by the US News and World Report. This really means there is a lot of work to be done. Today, we're looking to discuss this issue and how we can move forward to rectify that. Gender equity should be a priority in Washington State. Social, political, and economic equity is limited when we don't have the full participation of all of our women and girls. Harmful customs or social norms that contribute to gender-based violence, including female genital cutting, in addition to causing lifelong pain and suffering, can hold girls, women, and others from, women, and others who have undergone FGMC back from full participation. Discriminatory customs are entrenched in social norms and configurations of power, inevitably tied to one's status and place in our communities. Much like other harmful practices, female genital cutting reflects and perpetuates a broader trend in gender inequality in our communities. On that note, I would like to invite my panelists to introduce themselves. If you don't mind, please tell us a bit about yourself and how you got involved in this work to create the law in Washington about FGMC. Thank you. I'll start with Muna.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mona Osman. I'm a nurse practitioner by trade. I am Somali in origin, and I am a victim of, or a survivor. I don't want to say victim, a survivor of FGM. I work with the community, and APSA introduced me to this great team, and I'm a member of the coalition, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Muna. Bettina.
I'm Bettina Shell Duncan. I'm a professor of anthropology at the University of Washington, and I have been conducting research on FGM for more than 25 years. And I have become involved in this coalition, well, because of you, Mona, and because of you, Absa. It's through my contact with women in the community here who know that I have done work on this and have access to state-of-the-art evidence that I've been asked to become involved, and I'm happy to support the community-led efforts on ending FGM.
Thank you, Bettina. Stefan.
I'm Stefan Blandford, and I'm the Executive Director of Children's Alliance. We are the statewide nonpartisan children's advocacy organization, and we support all 1.6 million children in Washington State, and particularly those who are furthest behind, Black and Brown kids and their families. And I had a conversation with Absa a while ago and was inspired as I learned more about the issues that are in play here. I thought this is something that Children's Alliance needs to support and bring our 6,000 members across the state to bear on this issue. And so we are honored to be partners in this work and look forward to the success of the bill that is moving through the House right now.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Muna, I have a follow-up question for you. So can you share with us, how does FGMC impact us here in Washington State? So in other words, why is this an important issue for us to care about?
It is a very important issue to care about. Actually, I've been here for 22 years, and everywhere before this coalition and this work we did, people will say, oh, but why should we care? That's a global issue. That's their issue. It doesn't happen in the United States. It can happen in the United States. But in history, when we look at the documented, articles or debate people had, they debated the issue of even making it, because it's less harm to accept it, right? So in our community, remember, this is a culture for us. This is something we come in like so many other people. You come with your, we celebrate people's customs, we celebrate the food, we celebrate the holidays they celebrate, but this is one of the harmful one that come in, and people don't give up their cultures easily. So when people point finger and say, oh, whatever, you barbaric, they hide it because they don't want to trigger anybody or grab attention. And that's the worst part of it, because they hide it. So they take these kids, even if they do it in Washington. I don't know any case, but I hear the people who said it happened to me while I was here. But I know so many cases too, they take them out, educational cutting, and we see it happening. So I think collectively we are responsible of protecting these girls and coming forward for them. It affects us dearly. And I talk with so many, kids in college generation 1.5, and 2, I saw so many of them had one or the other of the type, because there's 4 types, right? So they had it done at some point. So I'm glad we're doing this work.
Thank you so much for sharing. Definitely, you raised the point really well. We all need to care about this issue because we're all impacted, whether directly or indirectly, because those of us who have to live with the trauma and the impacts of this practice, we know what it takes away from our ability to meaningfully contribute in our societies. And we all lose when portions of our communities are having to deal with such a practice. So thank you for sharing that, Muna. I have another question for you, Muna. So we both come from communities where FGMC is a custom. Recognizing that FGMC is a social norm in our communities, can you speak a little bit more about how FGC continues specifically in your community? What justifications are given for it?
So I work really hand in hand with the community, and we did work with the community in a big way. And I'm talking about the Somali community that I belong to. But I did Mama Aman with a group of wonderful women, and we worked in the community for 4 years. And we were sitting with these women, you know, and to us, it's not a taboo. For them, it's not a taboo. I want everybody to understand they're not doing it maliciously. I'm not giving them excuses, but that's what they know how to do. But when you sit down at their level, and remember, Somali communities is different than any community, Gambia, Egypt, what I'm going to say, Syria, any other refugees, because they've been in war for the last 30 years. They were in camps. The education level for these women, the health system they access is very low, right? So these are, you know, we are privileged, and we come with, even me, when I went to these women, I was like, I'm ignorant somehow, because I thought I can represent people. But when I went down, they didn't know. And that's where this bill is powerful. And I keep talking about it now in my TikTok. People are talking to me, elder women discussing it with me, because I earned their trust. So I'm here for them, not against them. If you don't know, we are here to let you know, and we are willing to teach anybody and everybody. We're creating the resources. This education component of this bill is huge for our community, because people always come and say, oh, well, that's barbaric. We're gonna put in jail, we're taking the kids, but you're breaking families too, who don't know what it was wrong. So I think this bill coming from us, for us, by us, with the help of the community coming together, I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think I am confident, and I told Bettina that before, I am confident that the community will accept that, because I worked for the last 4 years so hard. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, it's the action you're showing. It's affecting us every day. I see, you know, when I talked about my digital story, girls were opening up. It was happening, you know, they are in their 20s, and what happened to me happened to them in a worse way, because they went back home. And mine didn't happen back home too. So we know it's happening everywhere. And I'm glad we're taking care of this for us now. But I want to, like you said, want to take it everywhere. How can I stop it in Somalia? How can I save every little girl from that pain?
Thank you so much. That is beautifully said. And thank you for sharing your time and your experience with us today, Muna. You do an incredible work with people in your community and in the coalition. Thank you. So I want to move on to Bettina. So you have done research over 2 decades on FGMC in various communities for years. Could you explain to us a bit more about the idea of FGMC being a social norm, and how justifications given for FGMC was highlighted by Muna, speak to the challenge of changing social norms, particularly for FGC, and how can a law support changing social norm?
Well, thank you, Absa. I'd be happy to talk about that. I've had the privilege over my career as working as an academic consultant with UN organizations such as the World Health Organization and UNICEF to work on how to optimize interventions aimed at ending FGM. And progress that we've made in understanding what works and what doesn't is relevant for Washington State as well. Early interventions oftentimes targeted mothers of young girls. And it rested on the assumption that as mothers are made aware of the health risks associated with FGM, that they'd come to the decision that FGM was not a reasonable decision for their daughter. But these approaches really had disappointing results. And this came because of a failure to understand the dynamics of social norms within families and within communities. The first error that was made was that it was assumed that mothers are making decisions in isolation. Not true. Instead, the decision about whether a girl undergoes FGM or not is often made by a group of decision makers, often like extended family members. And not everybody who participates in the decision making has equal influence and power to persuade one another. Mothers may have little power to persuade older members of their family. The second error is that it failed to recognize that people, the decision makers, are also not isolated from the rest of their communities. They live within a social circle where there are norms and cultural meanings that people ascribe to the practice of FGM, and what is considered to be a good family or a good parent is defined by these norms. And people who do not follow the practices of what is considered good family are looked down upon and can lose status in the community. As both Absa and Muna have stated, FGM can be linked to important social norms and cultural meanings. A girl who has been cut may be regarded to be more likely to be a virgin at marriage. She might be regarded to be more likely to be faithful to her husband and more desirous as a wife. And families don't uphold these norms, may be punished. They may be looked down upon. Their girls may indeed be considered less desirable marriage partners. They may not be considered full-fledged members of the community of adult women or a religious community. Girls can suffer from discrimination, like Absa described being called solema, a very powerful invective that means not only uncut, but rude and ignorant. So the pressure to undergo FGM can be intense for girls and their families. And because of this, we know that individuals or single families who want to abandon FGM are often under intense pressure. So the solution is to coordinate change in families and communities so that people are not acting in isolation. If everybody can agree to abandon the practice, the negative sanctions can be lifted. But of course, getting collective agreement is a challenge, and there can be differences of opinion, and there can be holdouts, people who are resisting the idea that FGM should be something of the past, something to be abandoned. And when other members of the community are given the power of law to strengthen their position, law becomes a powerful tool for enhancing their power to persuade others that this is a practice that's no longer relevant in this context, in this time. Thank you.
That's a really great statement from your research, and it's interesting to hear you share what you've learned from that work. Coming from a community that practices it, I'm very familiar with what are the dynamics, the power dynamics that come into play, and that hinder our ability to abandon this practice, and what conversations happen and what they look like. So thank you for sharing that. So I wanted to get to Stefan at this point, and I guess to start with the question, we know that communities adapt differently based on their social norms, but in most cases where a harmful social norm is entrenched, laws are necessary to shift the mindset. Laws can set the standard for what we want for our communities and provide for accountability and sanctions when those standards are broken. For example, the drinking age. So Stefan, what are other harmful social norms that violate human rights that Washington has worked on? And has there been any long-term impact?
Thank you for that question. And I'm honored just to be a part of this panel to talk about such an important issue. So I've been in this role for 3 years, but Children's Alliance has been in place for 40 years. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. And in that time, we have advocated for a number of different policy changes that change social norms over time. You know, we're very fortunate in this far northwest corner of the state or of the country to be considered a pretty progressive state. We have in the past have implemented policies that are pretty cutting edge as far as the country is concerned, and many of the policies, social policies that have been adopted here have then informed changes that have happened across the country, in particular around LGBTQ youth, recognizing them in ways that other states have not done so, sexual abuse education curriculum, lots of different policies that we have taken a position on. And I see this as one that, as long as there is a robust effort towards educating communities, that's a key component. And other speakers have spoken about how important it is to combine some sort of sanction against those who perpetrate this crime on children and young women, that to be combined with some education that over time changes practices in communities. We believe at Children's Alliance, we believe very strongly in advocating with communities and not for communities. And it's very seductive, you know, particularly as an academic myself, to read the theories and come up with the strategies that we believe are best for communities and then try to impose them on communities. At Children's Alliance, I believe in this coalition and lots of other work that is being done. We try to figure out ways to learn from the community what is important to that community, and then work with legislators to actually implement laws. And the feedback that I heard that I'm really inspired by in this particular case is a recognition that communities do not want to just punish people without there being some educational component to change practice over time. We've seen in too many instances where the one tool that is used is to punish a community for past practices. And we know that that doesn't work. It has all these knock-on effects that do damage to communities and punish an entire community for something that one person, one perpetrator in that community enacts. And so that's why I'm really excited about the potential of Senate Bill 5453 to change practice and also to not negatively impact the communities where that practice is taking place.
Thank you for sharing those important points. Yeah, I definitely am there with you on that. I think there is something to be said when we punish people for actions they've always believed was part of their cultures and their lives without any opportunity for conversation and education. And I think that that's an important part of this legislation that we care about and we made so as a coalition was included and was the focus of the bill. So thank you so much, because we're all part of the communities. We love our families and our communities. We want to see a change and we want to protect girls, and that's the goal of this legislation. So thank you for sharing that. I want to give an opportunity to other panelists if you have a comment to add to that question. anything else you want to share, whether policy and law can be used as a tool for prevention and how you've seen that work? I will move on. I have another question for you, Stefan. Now that we have an understanding of how legislation has impacted harmful social norms in Washington, how do you think passing this legislation against FGMC could affect change?
Well, you know, a law can only go so far, but I believe a law is the foundation by which you would see social change happen over time. And as I've stated before, I think it's really important that we get this law passed, get it across the finish line. And we at Children's Alliance have seen a number of examples of, you know, one house passes a bill and then it gets stuck for one reason or another. And I think in particular, there are some minefields that are still out there with regard to this particular bill. You know, you have one legislator who takes a really strong position and in opposition to it and can quickly rally troops. So I think it is essential that people step up, and regardless of if you are in Washington State or in other states, if there are opportunities for you to provide testimony or sign in support, all of that leads to a groundswell where legislators will pay attention and recognize that this is something that probably should have been done a long time ago. And they have the opportunity to be on the right side of justice for girls and women in our state. It's somehow, it is appalling to me to think that, you know, in Washington State, this state that I live in this city that I live in, has such a high incidence and threat of girls and women being cut. And so we call ourselves a progressive state, but as you stated, there's so much work we need to do to ensure gender equality and gender equity. And I would like to insist that we be on the right side of this issue and see this law get passed.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Just to add context to that, Washington is actually one of the top 10 states in the US with the highest impacted communities, according to Population Reference Bureau. And it's also the only state among the top 10 that doesn't have a policy addressing this issue. All other surrounding states, including Oregon, actually has a law addressing this issue. So we have to get on this, like you stated. I appreciate you sharing that. And I know the link has been put in the chat, so feel free to vote, take a second, support this bill. It really matters. You don't have to be in Washington to do that, like Stefan said. Also, our coalition members who sign up to testify and participate in this work come from all over the US. So you don't have to be in Washington to take action or support this work. So thank you for that. I'm gonna
Can
move
I add
on.
one more point real
Yes,
quick?
please.
I'm
Yes,
sorry
please.
to cut you off. It wasn't intentional, but the statistic that I saw, Bettina, that Seattle, the greater Seattle area is in the top 5.
Yes.
In terms of is, you know, and we consider ourselves to be a pretty progressive city, right? And so I would imagine that there are an awful lot of people who reside in the greater Seattle area who are not pleased by that number, and hopefully they are taking action as well.
Totally, yeah. Thank you for stating that. I think that I guess if it's new for folks who are here today, it raises a question that we must answer. And why is that? You know, and why is it that we like to think of ourselves as progressive and doing so well? And now that we've had what's happening with FGMC and the picture it paints of the city. What does that mean for us, and how do we rectify that? I think that's something we should carry forward from this conversation. So thank you. Muna, I want to follow up with you. I know that we talked about the importance of having education in the bill, and we also know that we must support in uplifting a holistic and multifaceted approach on how we address this issue in the state. So my question for you is, how do you think education and outreach can be supported by legislation to work in tandem to end this practice? Who needs to be educated?
Oh my goodness, that's a loaded. So education is very important. Teaching people why, understanding why is this not okay, it's the better way to go, because they're going to do it by understanding, not because we pressure them, not because the law going to separate their families or whatever in their mind. So education, it's not only, mostly I want it for the families because they didn't have that opportunity to know. We want to provide them with the knowledge, provide them with the power of decision-making, informed decision-making. You know why. Nobody can pressure you. You hear like the video. It's one part that why you hear from the kid's perspective, the pain, the scare, the, you know, all these issues, you know, we never voiced before. We never talked about before. So bringing this forward will make that mom say, why would I want to put my daughter through this? It's not about religion, because we know for a fact, and it's well documented, that it's not Muslim or Christian, or there is so many communities practice. So most people will jump and say, but for the Somali diasporic parents, this is a culture. We are not the only one who do it. You know, I was shook when I joined the coalition, and I think I know a lot, but I thought it was very limited. But when I came to the coalition, it just opened my mind, and I looked to other cities, and I looked to other countries, and I looked to other experiences. I would encourage everybody to go to See Your Voices and hear and see for yourself how many different communities it impacted. Yes, it did impact us most because we are diasporic. All of us, we are, you know, POC people, yes. But it says a big volume that our kids need. If I am a 50-year-old and I just talked about it, imagine these kids, what they're going through. It's just a struggle they don't have to go through alone. So the education is not only for the parents. So I would love it, and I'm excited about it for the parents because we're giving them a chance. For the kids, going back to them, teaching them about their body, the power they have. They are not back home. They have a voice. They matter. That's why we're creating these paths. This is the equity. We give them the tool they need to be the best person they can be. So we're not against any culture, but I want to go to the elementary, to the middle school, to the high school. That's just me. To the college and tell them, you know, FGM is a thing. But anybody want to do anything to your body, you have the will to say no. And here is what you need to do. That's the community. We need to educate our clinicians. I'm a provider, and it's a shame that me coming to a therapist and I do the education for the therapist. Or I come to a doctor and they call each other, they're like they saw a monster. Oh my God. And no. We need to give them the education they need so they can do their job, and they can give resources, and they can be support to the community, the affected communities. I've been here for 22 years. Not one doctor other than my OBGYN asked me, are you going to cut your daughters? Oh, this is horrible. I feel sorry for what happened to you. But other than that, there is none, because they don't know. Not because we don't teach it in the curriculum. It's a global issue. It's over their issue. It does not affect us. But now we need to bring it forefront. Nursing school, PA school, NP school, doctor's school. When you're collecting the physical and history of a patient, do you know how much it affects the person in a long term and in a short term? There's consequences for this procedure. It doesn't matter if you take type 1 or type 4. It does not matter. This kid will go through traumatic event, being betrayed or hurt or scared, or from his closest people. Infections. There's so many kinds of fibroids, endometriosis. Some people can't have kids. Some people died and lost their life. So education is a very big component. And I'm so excited because we fought for that. We wanted to be in the bill. Our focus is not the criminalization. Our focus is how to bring this community and give them a chance. It's equity. We give them a tool they need to bring them up so they can level up. And
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for that. You said it beautifully. It couldn't have been said any other way. Thank you, Mona. I want to add, I think listening to you, I was thinking about the times that I have been to a doctor and to a therapist, and I felt like I was in the place to educate them about the issue before I could get the care that I need. And I'm really excited about this bill because I think it's really an opportunity to correct all of that, because we shouldn't have to be the ones educating the doctors before we can get the care that we need from them. So yeah, really excited, and thank you for sharing that. I think the education will also do something really fundamental that you talked about, which is that there is a myth around who this practice happens to. But we know today that this practice happens everywhere, regardless of your race or your economic status or your geographical location. We know that it happens to people who come into this country, but it happens to people who are born here. It happens to Black, brown, white individuals as well. So that, I think, this bill and the education component in it will really activate and elevate that conversation around how do we care? How do we better care for those who have been subjected to this practice? How do we better engage in conversations in our communities around this issue? So thank you. I have one more questions and then we'll move to the Q&A. So feel free to put your questions down in the chat and we would read them out to our panelists. My final question for all of you here is, what do we need this audience to do to get the bill across the finish line? What's your ask for the audience? We can start with Stefan and then Bettina and Mona.
Well, mine I stated earlier is for everyone in the audience, if you can, to reach out to the state legislature, particularly the House of Representatives, and make sure, particularly if you are a constituent of a member of the House, reach out to them and share your outrage that a bill has not been passed so far and that you want immediate action, and reference the bill number so that they know exactly which one you're talking about and why it's important. For those who are outside of the Washington state, you can do the same. You can indicate how important bills are and make sure that all of our members of the House of Representatives know. I'm sure that the governor, if this bill gets to his desk, he will be more than happy to sign it. I'm not speaking for him, but I have some reasonable assurance that that is the case. And so there are also opportunities for you to participate with organizations, SAHIO, and other organizations that are doing critical work. I would like to see a law across the state that applies to all states so that this practice won't happen anywhere in the United States of America. That's where I would start.
Thank you.
I'd like to add, yes, contacting legislators is an important step, but also talking to people within your communities to make sure that they know this law is not about putting parents in jail. This law is about preventing FGM. That is the key intent behind it. And so the fact that, unlike the previous bills that were introduced in Washington, this one actually includes a funding stream for community outreach and education. And that component is so important for protecting girls and protecting families before a crime is committed. And so if we can just make sure that understanding is spread throughout people in our networks, that would be extremely useful.
Thank you, Muna.
You're muted,
Yes,
Muna.
yeah, I was, okay, so I think Bettina and Stefan said it, already to go to the legislation, advocate for yourself. And I want to add another component is, as a community, we have a responsibility to go to these NGOs, those people who serving us, and ask them, have you support this bill? Have you sent your testimony? Have you give them the letter of support? Let's be all together on this, because this is something, it happened before, like Bettina said, but it never went to track. This one, because it is for the people, by the people, and the community who behind this. We want to see it for once, that not for once, but we want to see that this bill going all the way, because it's not about criminalizing, it's about empowering girls. And I want everybody in this room to take an action, not only to fill all these stuff we put on the website, but you need to go further and talk to somebody, tell somebody about it, and support us in that way, and ask them to fill and all this, talk to the legislation and some testimonies, and vote for it, not against it, hopefully, but collectively we can make a dent, and we want you to be on our side. So please do that.
Thank you so much. Stefan, looks like you want to add something else.
I'm hesitant to say this, but I'm just going to say it. I think that we need to talk to men about this as well. And part of the reason I have some hesitance in saying that is when I first learned of this topic, I could feel the squeamishness in discussing it. And I imagine that a lot of men probably would, but men hold disproportionate power to make change happen. And men need to be educated about both the legislation as well as the social change that needs to happen. And so I think we have to start having difficult conversations. I've shared earlier that Children's Alliance is very involved in advocating for disadvantaged kids, low-income kids, but particularly Black and brown kids. And so we have to have very difficult conversations about race and racism. And I think in this particular situation, we have to start talking to men, because as I shared, men hold disproportionate power to either make change or block change from happening.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's an important point to raise. I know from working on this issue, in my experience, it's often in the Gambia, it's often you can educate women, they want to change, but they have to go back to homes where men are the decision makers, and that has implications for that. And I know Sayo does a lot of work with men allies on this issue. And I hope that we can extend and expand those conversations, because this is an issue that involves addressing this issue will have to take all of us, and all of us include men and all of our community members. So I hope you can look to something in Stefan here and take action and be part of this movement. And thank you for raising that point. We will move to the Q&A section at this point. We have some questions. I would encourage you, actually, there is a lot of chat in the text. I've tried to get a hold of some of the information there, but please put your question in the Q&A option on Zoom. That way I can keep track of all the questions that are coming on, and I can present them to our panelists. I have one to start with. The question is there any way or activities we can get young girls involved in so that they can say no to FGM at an early age? What is what is the role that girls can play in ending this harmful practice?
I think that's a heavy question, because what power the girls have when the family are deciding, right? But you can say no. I know what you're doing. I know it's a scary place, and I know how that feels like it's so strong, but I did it when I was young. And I've saved my two younger sisters who were 5. 3 of us went through infibulation, which is type 3. But with the next 2, I was ready to die. I attacked that woman. And my little sisters, they are big now, they're late 30s, but they never been touched. They never been cut. So you can say no. Start with, go to an elderly in your family, go to your neighbor. I met the other 2 years ago, a 12-year-old who ran away, Somali girl, to her neighbor, a white lady, and she didn't know what to do. She was in the hospital, met me when I was taking care of her husband. And then she came to the hospital and said, I have 12-year-old at home. I don't want to be in trouble. I don't know how to help her. Go to somebody. Talk to your teacher, somebody you trust. If you don't trust them, you cannot talk. But do something and say no. And once you say something and you do something, then other people can get involved. Hopefully until this bill is a law. But you have to speak up and you have to protest. That doesn't mean you run away and stay in the street, but go to somebody you trust, your teacher, your doctor, your friend, your friend mom, your nurse at the school. Say no, vocalize it, talk about it. And then the parents actually, because he's talking to somebody else, they can slow down and you have a better chance to not happen to you. But I want you to, this is your body. You can say no. Nothing will happen to you worse than being cut. So say no and save yourself and talk to somebody you trust. Don't put yourself in a harm way. Don't be heroic, but talk to somebody who you trust. It doesn't matter how they look, who they are, if they understand or not, and say, I'm scared. I need help.
Thank you, Mona. Any one of you want to add something to that? No? Okay. All right, thank you. I have a question that's actually, Mona, you perhaps are in a good place to answer. It's a long question, some of which we've touched on throughout this conversation. So I will break it apart and we'll take it up from there. So the first part is the bill criminalizing or banning cutting within the state? What is its jurisdiction on vacation cutting? What was the local input on the bill? And the second part of the question is there room for transnational framing approach given the tight-knit diasporic communities across the globe, especially thinking about the Somali diaspora? And there is a follow-up on, can we discuss a bit more on the education outreach components of the bill? What does it entail and how will it be implemented? So we can start with the first part of the question, and then I'll follow up with the second part, which is the first part is it criminalizing it in the state? And what is the take on vacation cutting? And what was the local input?
Is that question for anybody, or are you gonna go first? That's your part.
I want to see if other panelists have a take on that. Okay, I can take this on. Stefan, you want to start?
No.
This was
No, I
your
think you-
expertise, Absa.
Yeah, I think
This
you
is
are far more knowledgeable.
Okay, I will start and then I will give it back to you all to add anything else. Okay, so the bill will criminalize cutting for the cutters. So anybody who cuts a minor in Washington state will face a charge of gross misdemeanor in Washington. There is a provision on vacation cutting. So a person is not allowed to take a child out of the state to have this practice done on them. and they may be charged. There is a charge for a civil penalty, which means a minor or their families can bring a charge against the person who cuts a minor or transports a minor to be cut outside of the state. That is the component on criminalization. It is criminalized for anybody who does the cutting. The local input on the bill, I have to say, I want to thank Senator Kaiser for her work with the coalition on this. I think she models what policymakers need to do when they engage in policies on behalf of the communities that they represent. Throughout this process, she had engaged. We had several meetings before the bill was finalized, and what is in the bill today is the input of community members who form part of the coalition. The Washington Coalition to End FGM is a survivor-led coalition. It cuts across various communities and backgrounds across the US and especially in Washington state. And we told the senator what we want included in the bill, how we want it framed, and what we don't want included in it. And ultimately, that is what became the bill. So there is a lot of local input on the bill. Survivors and communities impacted by the issue have taken a lead on that work. I hope that answers the question, and I can open it up to the panelists here to add anything else.
Well, also the civil charge portion of it, that when a girl reaches 18, she has 10 years to bring civil charges for direct and indirect costs from having been cut. That also came from input from the coalition, from and people who testified in Olympia.
Totally. Thank you so much for adding that. Yes, there is additional compensatory damages provision that allows victims to be compensated for the harm that's been subjected to them. Okay, the second part of the question is there room for transnational framing and approach given the tight-knit diasporic communities across the globe, thinking specifically about the Somali diaspora? And I guess, Mona, you want to take on that, but I want to add a second part of that question. I want to pass that to you as well. Can we talk a bit more about the education and outreach component of the bill, and what does it entail, and how will it be implemented?
You know, I don't think it's finalized. It just we just went through the committee for the funding, right? So we don't know how much we have, but I am optimistic because they said once passed, the DOH have to take it and create a path. We need to understand we're starting this from scratch, because we do not, as a community, as you know, we all these professionals who came together with the coalition, we do not want to traumatize families. We do not want to. So we have to be patient. But what we're hoping for is the DOH to create the path, to add it to the mandatory, reporting thing. How and why and when, we don't know yet. But we hoping that we will be hands-on like we've been to shape this. But what we hoping for is that to create a path for these girls to come forward for, to get the therapies they needed, to have access and to train people. If the family want information, if they want to understand more, they can come forward to that. We want to go to kids in their schools, their college. But this again, also, I want. It's all thinking and planning we want to do, but we will not know until it passes the House, and then the money allocated will go to these to the DOH to create the paths and then we can sit, and I'm hoping we will be included in this discussion. But we work hard to include that part, and it's a part of the bill, the resources for the clinicians and for the community, and to create these safe paths. because calling CBS on a kid who was cut and removing him from the house, it's not gonna do anything for that kid. It's just gonna re-traumatize that family. So we are for that, but we don't know the details. We will know what we talked about while we shaping this bill. So I want the community to support us and have faith in us, because we did this work so far. But this affects so many communities. I was shook. That the amount of people affected is not, I thought we are only Somalis, and I see some, some community was affected in a smaller, but it affect a wider range, and there is a wide support to this bill. So please and please, we always question the intentions behind bills, but this bill, literally, like Absa said, I agree with every word she said. So many meetings, so many emails, so many corrections to the wording even we use happened from the community. The community input is big, and also the legislature's support. It passed anonymously. That speaks volume that we are finally, breaking ground for people to listen and say this is here. So I want our people from our communities, a diverse community who impacted of this, to come and join us. The coalition is here. We are here to know the work for yourself. If you have questions, but give us a chance and give us your support. We are here for you. So the transition too, she asked about, we put a hold on the law itself. We suggested to put a hold for 2 years to give a chance for the community to get the education and the resources and all that before it takes effect. So I'm telling you, you will be surprised if you read the bill for yourself. It came literally from the community, and ABSA is the one who went to the senator and asked her to take on this bill. So even the approach to start this bill, it came from us. So I hope that will, because we always question as a community, but look at us, we all here for the same reason. And I know who asked that question, and I want her to come and be in our team. She's a PhD student now. So hey, you the PhD student, so you come and join us, Mama Aman. That was my brain in Mama Aman. So please come and join us. We have a space for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Muna. We are running low on time, but this is a very interesting, educative, informative conversation. And I want to give an opportunity to Bettina and Stefan to bring up anything else you want to add as you wrap up this conversation, anything else you want to share. And we can wrap up the conversation. I know there are a lot of good questions, and I am really sorry we can't touch them all. A lot of them came up throughout the conversation, but I hope we can continue expanding this conversation in our own spaces and in our workspaces as well. But I want to pass it to you too, if you have anything else to share.
Okay, I'll add that if this bill passes, there will be an allocated funding stream to the Department of Health, and it's very likely that the Department of Health will engage a working group. And how to do the outreach and education, we don't need to reinvent the stone. There are other states that have already passed laws and have been advising this coalition as well. And so there are approaches for outreach and education, for example, in Virginia and in Massachusetts. And so there's been very active collaboration and advising about ways to approach the law and ways to approach outreach and education. And it's likely that there's going to be a coalition who will have a chance to review what has been done and select from what they determine to be best practices.
Thank you. Stefan.
Now, I would add really quickly, and that Bettina stole my thunder. All too frequently, advocates will rally around a bill, get it across the finish line, celebrate the fact that they did all the work, and leave it to the bureaucrats in a particular agency to actually implement the the bill. And frequently the legislative intent that it was originally passed with gets lost in that process. And so it's critically important that all of the communities and advocates who have been involved in this stay with it. The fight is not over when the governor signs the document. And so it's critically important that you continue to monitor and watch and make sure that the bill gets actually implemented with the legislative intent that you worked so hard to get encoded into the law.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to thank all three of you, Muna, Bettina, Stefan, for the gift of your time and your expertise and your experiences and for sharing with all of us. And thank you all. And I want to thank the coalition members for all the work you put into getting this work this far, to SIO, Mother Africa, and to the U.S. Network to End FGMC as well. Children's Alliance, thank you. And I'm going to pass it back to Maria to get us to the finish line.
Thank you so much, Apsa, and thank you to all of the speakers, to you as the moderator and to the speakers for just a fantastic discussion. I always know we run out of time, and this is just hopefully the beginning of a conversation that all of our attendees will be having in your own respective circles as well too. So we just want to end quickly with another poll. We would love to understand after this webinar your thoughts and your opinions around the legislation. So if everyone could take part and finish or fill out that poll, that would be wonderful. And as you are filling out that poll, I also, again, want to remind everybody about the action alert, and we will put that link again in the chat box. Please do take some time to fill that out. Everybody can, regardless of where you are, take part in sending that action alert. And then this was mentioned, but there is going to be, again, a hearing on the bill in the House. As Apsa mentioned, it passed the Senate, but now it is in the House, and there'll be a hearing on Monday, March 13th in the House Committee on Community Safety, Justice, and Reentry. And we would love your support. I know the links have been shared already in the chat box, but we will do it again. There are various ways to support. You can vote pro. That's the simplest, easiest, quickest way to do it. You can also testify if you are in the Washington area in person. You can testify virtually, or you could submit written testimony as well. So there are definitely ways you can take part. And then finally, if we could just go to the next slide. If anybody is interested in connecting with any of us, if you're interested in connecting the Washington Coalition, we do have our email address on the screen, and then the various sponsoring organizations that have included their website. So please feel free to reach out to any of us as well. We are happy to talk about this issue and fill you in and get you involved if you are interested in doing that. And then one last slide. We do know that a lot of folks are joining from around the country and with different experiences, connections to FGMC. So if you are someone who is joining and you are impacted by FGMC and need additional support, we want to let you know that there is a support line available for survivors of FGMC. This is a project that SAO began in partnership with an organization, Asian Women's Shelter, and they have extensive training on FGMC. It's a peer support line, but if you need that emotional support, someone to talk to, please feel free to contact this line, and the phone number is there, and the hours of operation is as well is on the slide. And then finally, if you are interested in learning more about that digital storytelling project, in which we shared the videos from Apsa and and Mona, we actually have around 70 videos. So there are many people who have shared their stories, and feel free to visit the website and take a look as well. So thank you all again. We definitely wanted to share some additional resources. We'll send it around the recording, but we really appreciate all of you being here. Thank you. Bye. Have a good rest of your day.